Hey guys, it's Sunday, went for a 6 mile run this morning. Had a lot of thoughts on that run, one of which was kind of an analogy for self-improvement, personal development, or really just growth in general. And if you've ever seen it, so in a group of guys, they put an empty glass under a water sink, and they all take turns turning the water on, turning it off, right? Fills up the glass. And then eventually they're just putting little droplets to try to not overflow the glass. And I thought it was kind of interesting, maybe a little bit of a metaphor for improvement, right? Because when you first start trying to do something, running, let's take for example, you make a lot of strides right in the beginning. And with a lot of the initial work, or weight training is a really good example of that too, right? Beginner gains. And I think that's an interesting analogy. And the expectation is basically just diminishing returns. And when you get that cup, 90% of the way full, if that's your ultimate capability, then it just gets harder and harder, and the drops get smaller and smaller that you can put in the cup, or that you put in the cup, right? But, at the end of the day, every one of those is the amount of skill that you have in that, is the amount of ability that you built and developed. And I think that's pretty interesting. And that's part of where the Spartans come in, and part of where my own personal development comes in, is just really doing challenging things makes harder things seem easier. And so, or in general, it just makes the rest of your life easier, right? The things that used to stress me out don't even come close anymore, because I put myself through way harder challenges. And I do it for fun, so to speak, which is kind of interesting. Or with skateboarding, or with rock climbing, right? There's a lot of failure over and over and over again, and you get used to that, but it's also growth as you get faster, as you get better at obstacles, as you get better at different climbs, as you can do harder climbs. All these things are just building up to another level of performance, right? I think that we like to think of the corporate ladder a lot of times, and really there's just a ladder in development in general, right? Grading up to the next level, or some people have used the analogy of, like role-playing games, if you were ever a nerd like me, in understanding that you level up and you're just at the next level, but the bosses can get harder. And that's really the beauty of it, is to just challenge harder and harder bosses and do bigger and bigger things. To me, that provides a lot of level of fulfillment. So that's one of the reasons why I've continued with Spartans. I think I want to do some bigger things moving down the road. But this year was just a continuation of last year. Being out there and then finishing those races, and some of them were definitely outside my comfort zone at the time. They've just primed me to do more and more things that I'm kind of uncomfortable with. And those uncomfortable things really prompt more growth. And that's been really good for me. And so I just kind of keep leaning into that discomfort, into these things that I want to do. And yet I have fears, I feel risks that really are just perceived more than anything, right? I talked to somebody the other day about primal fears, and when we were cavemen and had to go out hunting and face the wild and face nature, and the challenges we had then and the risks were much more real and much more hazardous, basically, to our ability to survive. We don't really have that anymore. And so really challenging yourself and pushing yourself to your limits, I think it's a very worthwhile and fulfilling experience for me. But it also sets the stage in general for just doing bigger, more uncomfortable things, harder things, and really achieving more and more. So that way I have a life and a story that I can look back on with pride. So that's one of these things as well. I always think that if you look at it too much from the front end and you allow those risks and those fears to get the better of you, then you just miss out on great opportunities to do really interesting and really fun things, to start to write your story in a way that's a lot more enjoyable. So I encourage you to just find the things that you find challenging, or the things that have been rattling around that you want to try, or that you want to do, and it's really stopped you that you stopped yourself from doing. Get out there and do them. Just time is short. So go find some challenges, get out there. I always like the idea of, if you ever think about it, is remembering anybody else's embarrassing experiences. And for the amount that you probably witnessed throughout your life, it's probably a struggle to come up with any, or many. We probably definitely can't come up with more than on one hand, right? 5 experiences, but maybe none in general. You can remember yours for sure, but really anybody else's. And so, like, that's the idea. Nobody cares. Like, at the end of the day, even if they do care, even if they give you some grief, like, it goes away. It's not a big deal. You get to do the things that you want to do, and you'll have that experience. And if you lean in, you can get good at them and maybe be a completely different person, be way more of the person you want to be down the road. Give it a shot. You never know.